Good evening. At this time, please silence your cell phones and be advised that these proceedings are being recorded. For those physically present in the council chambers who desire to address the city council during the meeting, please complete a request to speak form. They're available at the front entrance, and then present that to the city clerk. Speakers physically present and participating via Zoom will be called upon at the appropriate time, and each speaker will be allowed 3 minutes speaking time. City clerk, at this now in our meeting, will be making a Zoom broadcasting announcement.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As of June 15th, the City of Grand Terrace reopened its public meetings. If you would like to participate telephonically and speak on an agenda item, you can access the meeting by dialing 1-669-900-9128. Enter meeting ID number 894-2029-4733 and password number 643323. You will be placed in the waiting room muted until it is your turn to speak. You may also submit your comments by sending them to ccpubliccomment@grandterrace-ca.gov. The City of Grand Terrace thanks you for doing your part preventing the spread of COVID-19.
Thank you. At this time, I will call to order the City Council. City Council is the successor agency to the Community Redevelopment Agency and Housing Authority for the City of Grand Terrace, October 12th, 2021. If you would, please rise. Our invocation tonight will be given by Mayor Pro Tem Hussey, and our Pledge of Allegiance will be led by Interim City Manager Michael Milheiser.
Please bow your head and join me in prayer. God, thank you for this beautiful day, and thank you for our nation. Lord, I just pray for our nation. I pray for the residents here at Grand Terrace that you bless them and keep them in good health. Lord, I pray for this council that you give us wisdom and your guidance to make good decisions that will betterment for the whole city, God. And I just thank you for our staff who are working here, and protect them and keep them safe. And Lord, thank you for our first responders, and always protect them and keep them safe and bring them home to their family. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
If you would all please place your hand over your heart. Follow me as we pledge allegiance to the greatest country in the world. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Thank you, Mr. Milheiser. Madam City Clerk, may we have roll call, please?
Councilmember Allen.
I'm here.
Councilmember Wilson.
I am here.
Councilmember Robles. Mayor Pro Tem Hussey.
Present.
Mayor McNabo.
Present.
Madam Mayor, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Do we have any reordering of, additions to, or removal of items from the agenda?
Madam Mayor, I'll be removing the presentation as the presenter is not here.
Okay, so no special presentation tonight. All right, and Mr. Interim City Manager, did you want to reorder by removing something for the consent calendar, or do you want me to ask for that as I come to the consent calendar?
Oh, how do we do that here? For the meeting change? Is that for the meeting change, Madam Mayor?
Yeah, let me just handle it under the consent calendar.
Okay,
if you want to pull it off,
perfect.
that'd be fine.
Thank
All right,
you.
so consent calendar items are expected to be routine and non-controversial. They will be acted upon by the City Council at one time without discussion. Any council member, staff member, or citizen may request removal of an item from the consent calendar for discussion. So are there requests for removal of items from the consent calendar at this time?
Madam Mayor, I would ask that we pull item 4 for further discussion, which is the cancellation of the council meetings in November and December.
Okay, so I will take that item as soon as we're done with the consent calendar. Any other items? All right, is there a motion for consent calendar items minus item number 4?
Motion to approve the consent calendar minus item 4.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, so motion for consent calendar minus item 4 by Councilmember Allen, and a second by Councilmember Wilson. May we have roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Allen.
Yes.
Councilmember Wilson.
Yes.
Councilmember Robles? Mayor Pro Tem Hussey?
Yes.
Mayor McNiva?
Yes,
Motion passes unanimously.
thank you. All right, so item 4 was cancellation of city council meetings scheduled for November 23rd, 2021, and December 28th, 2021. Mr. City Attorney, is this your item?
It is not, but I'll briefly present it for you. So the item tonight is to request that the council consider canceling the second meeting in November 23rd, and second meeting in December 28th. Historically, the council has selected to cancel those meetings because it's a holiday season and due to travel and things of that sort. The council has historically canceled those meetings. So that is staff's continued recommendation with one caveat. As you know, the city council is in the process of recruiting for a new city manager. Under state law, a city manager agreement must be approved at a regular meeting, not a special meeting. So obviously, our goal is to bring it to the council as early as possible. In light of that, we are recommending at this point to hold off on canceling the second meeting of November, just in case we may need to have a meeting on November 23rd. We would still recommend canceling the December 28th meeting, no change there. So we could obviously determine at the first November meeting or second October meeting if the second meeting is actually necessary, and we could cancel it at that point. But for now, I would ask that we keep November 23rd open potentially for that one sole agenda item. And speaking with the interim city manager, he has indicated that we will only have that one agenda item if we do need the November 23rd meeting. So the recommendation at this point in time is to adopt the proposed resolution, however, only canceling the December 28th meeting at this point in time. The other alternative is we can hold off on this agenda item entirely until the second meeting in October, until we may have a little bit more definition, or first meeting in November.
All right. Questions of staff at this time? All right, so you must have been perfectly clear.
Thank you.
Any request to speak on this item?
No, Madam Mayor.
All right, so I'll bring it back to council for discussion and consideration of a motion.
Mayor, I'll make a motion so we can get the discussion going.
Okay,
So I'll make a motion that we amend number 4, or that that it be changed so that only December 28 is canceled at this time, and not November 23.
okay.
I think that's what the city attorney had
Yes.
said that we need to do.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you second? Okay, so the motion is that we will be canceling meetings scheduled for December 28th, 2021. But we will not be canceling the November meeting. Motion was made by Councilmember Allen, second by Councilmember Wilson. Any further discussion? All right, may we have roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Allen.
Yes.
Councilmember Wilson.
Yes.
Councilmember Robles. Mayor Pro Tem Hussey.
Yes.
Mayor McNiva.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. I was remiss when I opened our meeting. I wanted to mention that tonight we will be closing in honor of a longtime resident, very civic-minded resident, Lisa Boone. She was a very active participant in our Grand Terrace Women's Club. She was a very, very gentle soul, but she was not a shrinking violet by any means. She always had a lot of ideas for the good of the city, and I will miss talking to her about those. So we will be closing in her memory tonight. And I believe perhaps we have a special presentation now?
Yes, Chairman Phelps has arrived.
All right.
Oh, there you go. Hello, Council and Mayor. Do we have the slideshow available? Okay. Okay, looks like it's warmed up. All right, hello, Council. I'm Brian Phelps, 11833 Kingston Street, Grand Terrace, California. I am the current chairman of the Parks and Recreation Committee, and I'm here to give you our committee's recommendation on building a skate park in Grand Terrace. We conducted a special meeting on the skate park, and about 30 residents attended, and I believe the sentiment was 100% positive in support for building a skate park. The Parks and Recreation Committee also held a vote on pursuing the building of the skate park, and it was unanimous 4-0 to recommend that we pursue the possibility of building a skate park. This is only the early stages of providing a place for our residents and their kids to skate, ride their scooters, their bikes, and rollerblades. And I have even seen specialized wheelchairs like the one in the photo used at similar parks to have fun. We will need to explore possible locations for the skate park, which we believe should be in a highly visible and well-trafficked location to maintain a safe and beautiful park. We need to pursue additional funding ideas like donations and grants. Redlands received a grant from the Tony Hawk Foundation to help build their recent first phase of the skate park, and we should look into similar options. The benefits to our residents, to our businesses, are that the property damages that occur from skaters will be greatly reduced. The curbs and the stairs will be less likely to be damaged. The benches and walls will be less likely to be marked up, and the chance of a window being broken from an errant skateboard will be less likely to occur. The benefits to our residents our residents will receive include a safe place to exercise and to release tension through exertion, as well as an area to express creativity. It can be very rewarding to practice a skill or a trick, and through hard work and practice, master the skill or trick and show it off in front of your friends. And the skate park allows a safe place to practice and to perform those skills. The committee also believes that a subcommittee should be created that is dedicated to exploring the funding, the location, and the design of the skate park. They would pursue various ways to fundraise to lessen the financial impact on the city's funds and explore available grants that could be applied to the project. Thank you for your time tonight, and if you have any questions at this time, I would love to try to answer them, or if I can't, then staff may be able to assist us. And let's see, I'm not sure if this will play. That's okay.
Thank you, Mr. Phelps. What are you envisioning as the next steps from this update?
We need to find a location and fundraise to help the funding for the park, as well as.
And when you say we, who's
I
in,
meant-
who's in that group?
In that group, the staff, the possible subcommittee, and the Parks and Recreation Committee.
Okay, so you're asking for something to come to council that would give that direction to staff and and perhaps have more to it in a formal staff report.
I believe so. I believe that's the next step, if I'm correct.
Okay. Councilmember Wilson?
I just want to say first and most, I'm really thrilled to see something like this come forward. I've been a big advocate for this. On the other end, though, we have to be careful as a city, and what I'd like to find out as a fourth item on your list is how it's going to affect the city's liability. Because location as well as parking, as well as just injuries, the possibility is there. So we have to find out how we can spec for that, if there's a rider that goes on the insurance to be able to cover it, and if that's what we have to do, then how are we going to recover funds?
As I understand from asking the exact same question to staff, was that the city's not liable for the injuries while they're, as long as the rules are posted and they're okay. Because other cities that have done it, and their liability is also limited to where
Yes,
they're
it's
not.
the same thing at ski lodges. They always have the list on there, and it says, we're not liable if you use
Right.
this facility. But anybody can sue anybody. So
True.
I think if this comes back to us as a staff report, maybe we can get some input from our Joint Powers Insurance Authority pool and city manager, or city
you go.
attorney, and answer those questions. So it's good that you're bringing that up, because if this does come back, those are the items that should be part of the staff report, as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you.
And I also think that cameras would be very important to keep it from being graffitied, and that's why it also has to be in a very public location so that people driving by can see it a lot. Police can drive by and see it a lot, as well as cameras, I believe, should also be included.
Thank you. Councilmember Allen?
Excuse me. Hey, Commissioner Phillips, that was a great presentation. I'm glad you came with the visuals. Came across really well. I agree with Councilmember Wilson. This is a project that's long overdue for our city. Now, one of the things that I've heard expressed by some of the residents, and when I've been going out talking about this, I wanted to ask you if this came up during the meeting. Some of the residents have expressed a desire that possibly a BMX course could be included. Did that come up during the meeting?
It would be, as I understand, an all-wheel kind of a park where bicycles, rollerblades, skateboards, and any other type of.
Okay, so people were open to that sort of thing too.
Yes.
Okay,
yes,
great.
yes.
That's good. Yeah, and now also, the subcommittee that you referenced that you had, that the Planet Parks and Recs was recommending, would that be a subcommittee formed from the Parks and Recs committee or from us?
I believe it would be a Parks and Rec subcommittee,
Okay.
and then they would bring their information to us, and then I would bring it to you.
Okay, that's great.
I believe that's one of those things that staff has to tell me which way.
Okay, well, thanks a lot, Brian.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Hussey?
Thank you. Thanks, Brian, for your presentation. But just a couple things I want parents and skaters to be aware. It's a long red tape process,
It is.
and you know how long it took for the dog park.
Yes.
And how long, much money, it was crazy amount of money for the dog park.
Yeah,
So
I've been pursuing it for 20 years, I believe.
So that and the liability and everything else, and, you know, and just to throw it out there, you know, and I know we're trying to find a place for people to skate and stuff, but you talked about private property and damage, you know, and to our businesses, respect is a big thing.
It is.
That these skaters need to do, and they're doing it every time. It's not right them out there skating and that, so I just suggest to the parents who have skaters, not saying that their kids are doing it, to talk to them about not doing that in, you know, public locations and stuff.
I would
It
agree.
goes a long way when people see positive things instead of negative things.
I would definitely agree. That-
But, you know, yeah, good luck in this process, and, you know, hopefully it'll go through, so, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Phelps, I appreciate you making the time to come out today and give us this update, and I think staff will be working on perhaps bringing this back. All right, thank you very
Okay.
much.
Thank you, Mayor, and welcome back.
Thank you. So we'll move on to public comment. This is the opportunity for members of the public to comment on items not appearing on the regular agenda. Because of restrictions contained in California law, and the city council may not discuss or act on any item not on the agenda, but may briefly respond to statements made or ask questions for clarification. Items may also have a brief response from staff to questions raised, and perhaps a matter may be agendized for a future meeting. Are there any requests to speak at this time?
No, Madam Mayor.
All right. And we have no public hearings, and we have no unfinished business. So we'll move on to our new business. And so agenda item 6G that we will take next is a city council's successor agency to the Community Redevelopment Agency and Housing Authority item. It's the consideration and possible action to adopt a joint resolution implementing Governor Newsom's recent authorization of Assembly Bill Number 361, or AB 361, regarding the lifting of Brown Act restrictions authorizing teleconferencing of meetings of legislative bodies. Our city attorney, Adrian Guerra.
Good evening and thank you. So this item is regarding the new legislation AB 361 regarding remote meetings for legislative bodies throughout the state. A little bit of background. The traditional Brown Act does provide for teleconference meetings. Under the traditional meeting procedure, the council member that is remotely participating must post the agenda at their location. So if they're out of the state, out of the country, they have to literally post the agenda at that location and allow members of the public to participate from that location. So I've had council members participate from the East Coast, from out of the country, and we're joking like, okay, is there anybody actually coming to participate from your location? However, under the traditional Brown Act, that's what's required. We also require a quorum of the legislative body to be meeting in the jurisdiction of the city. Recently, the governor in 2020 enacted some executive orders, primarily N25-20. And in those executive orders, the governor suspended the teleconference requirements as set forth as I just described. It granted the most flexibility that cities had ever seen, public agencies, water districts, housing authorities, to meet remotely. It expired, however, on September 30th, 2021. In advance of that, the legislature adopted AB 361. It was effective October 1st, and it allowed public agencies to continue to utilize remote and virtual platforms for meetings, subject to certain findings, which I'll get into shortly. So during the last year and a half, we really didn't have to make any findings. The governor basically suspended the teleconference rules. Everybody could be meeting remotely if they wanted to. Nobody had to be in person. Yet AB 361, which in my opinion wasn't the most well-drafted piece of legislation, allowed it, but subject to certain findings. If we do not adopt AB 361, we just can meet in person, and if somebody wants to teleconference in, they just have to teleconference in through the old way, posting the agenda at their location and allowing members of the public to participate from that location. So what are the findings? The first finding is that a state of emergency exists as proclaimed by the governor. Currently, the governor's proclamation still exists. So we meet finding 1 if the council was interested in proceeding under AB 361. Then there are 3 findings that are set forth as options. The first one is that state or local officials have imposed or recommended measures to promote social distancing. That's option 1. Option 2, the legislative body is meeting solely for the purpose of determining by a majority vote if having a meeting in person would present an imminent risk to health or safety of attendees. The third option is the legislative body has determined by majority vote that as a result of the state emergency, meeting in person would present imminent risks to health or safety of attendees. I'll come back to these findings shortly. So if we were to proceed under AB 361, we have a few requirements. The first one is no physical location is required for public attendance or public comment. However, the public must be able to access and participate in the meeting through a call-in or internet-based service, which we currently already have, and instructions for how to participate if they choose to appear. Second, teleconference meetings must protect the statutory and constitutional rights of the parties and the public. Third, the public must be able to attend the meeting via call-in option or internet-based service option. Fourth, legislative bodies may allow public comments to be submitted prior to a meeting, but must also allow the public to participate in real time through call-in or internet-based service. Legislative body cannot require public comments to be submitted in advance of the meeting. This was common over the last year and a half. Many cities were requiring emails to be submitted ahead of time. Some cities were only allowing email public comments. If there is any disruption of the call-in or internet-based service, we must suspend the meeting immediately, and we cannot take further action until those issues are resolved. Lastly, when providing a public comment period, whether after each agenda item or during a public comment period, we must allow reasonable time for members of the public to comment, and must also allow reasonable time for members to register for a third-party host if that's applicable. I don't believe that's applicable here, but that is a requirement. And lastly, timed public comments cannot be closed until that timed public comment period has elapsed. So in some cities, you'll see that they'll allow 10 specific minutes for comment on an item. If we identify that on the agenda, then we have to allow all 10 minutes to elapse before we move on. If we invoke AB 361, it must be renewed every 30 days. Findings must still exist, the ones that I referenced earlier. And if no renewal, then we go back to the traditional Brown Act teleconferencing procedures. So tonight, I prepared a resolution for the council and the successor agency board and the housing authority board as a joint item. It would invoke AB 361 if that is a desire of the council. It is based on, number one, the governor's proclamation of emergency, which is still in existence, and second, that state or local officials have imposed recommended measures to promote social distancing, which still take place. We would need council direction as to if they wanted to implement AB 361 as to how to adopt. And I say that because there's different views on how it can be adopted. There's one school of thought that all participants should be participating remotely, meaning everybody who's in the meeting should be participating remotely. And I'll go back and explain why in a second. The second is that council commission and staff in person with public remote. So only staff here, council here, but the public would be remoting in for teleconferencing. And the third is to have the hybrid, which is basically what we have now and what we've been doing the last few years. And the reason, let me go back a few to the findings. The reason that that's a little bit confusing is the second category of findings. So when you look at these options, if you look at the third option specifically, where the council is making a determination that meeting in person would present imminent risks to health or safety of attendees, if a council were to make that finding, there would be immediate potential liability to open up the chambers and allow people to attend, or staff for that matter. And so there was a rule of, a perception of this provision that every finding should result in the same result. So if we're meeting the third finding, nobody's going to be in person. The question was whether the first finding and the third finding should be treated similarly in terms of implementation. That was a little bit of a question mark. I was able to reach out, and I appreciate the city clerk for putting me in contact with the legislative director for the City Clerks Association, who actually participated in the negotiations of this bill. And I reached out to her, and we discussed it. She said that initially, the legislation was supposed to grant as much flexibility to cities, basically allow what we've been doing for the last year and a half. But the watchdog groups that had a seat at the table in terms of negotiating the bill wanted to ensure that there was still in-person public access. There was a concern that public agencies would go remote to avoid in-person public participation. And so she felt that the intent was to allow the hybrid, if that was the desire of the council. Because again, there would be low risk. The watchdog groups, they're not going to complain because we're allowing people in person. So initially, my initial thought was it should be remote, but after discussing the background and intent of the legislation, I feel comfortable recommending that if the council were to enact AB 361, that hybrid meetings be allowed, like we've been doing for the last year or so. My only recommendation would be, again, if we're going under finding one, is if we're making the finding that there's measures to promote social distancing, that we actually adhere to the social distancing requirements in the chambers to be consistent with that finding. So with that, the draft resolution is on the table for council and the Successor Agency Board and the Housing Authority Board for consideration. If no action is taken, we just continue to proceed under the current Brown Act, traditional Brown Act, which is in-person meetings. And if anybody wants to remote participate, they can do so, but they'd have to place the notice and agenda at their location and allow public participation from that location. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Guerra. Any questions of staff at this time? Councilmember Allen.
Thank you, Mr. City Attorney. If we follow the recommendation, and for this, adopting this resolution, how long will it be before we have to do it again?
It would be effective for 30 days, and then we can renew it in November.
For another 30 days?
That is correct. And I should note that the legislation expires in 2024. There was some thought out there that every city had to adopt action before October 1st when it went into effect, and that's not the case, because it's over the next 2 years that it's effective. So any emergency that may come up could trigger the requirement for this invocation.
Is there any way, not that it's that big of a pain in the neck, but is there any way to get around that every 30-day renewal? I mean, could you do it for like 180 or
No,
90?
That was actually one of the points that the watchdog groups really
Can it come
pushed.
back on the consent calendar?
Yes, I don't see why not.
Yeah, that would be just as easy then.
Yeah, I don't see why not. Now, the other thing I'll point out is the watchdog groups didn't want an endless invocation that we adopted once and then we don't have to revisit again. So they push for the 30-day requirement that we have to continually invoke it. The other point I wanted to point out is most cities are treating each of their commissions the same way. So as does the council, as goes the commissions. That's been the traditional recommendation.
Further questions? So if we revert back to regular Brown Act, that means the public is not going to have an option to participate virtually because we will not be having hybrid meetings as we are having them now. Is that correct?
Well, that's an interesting point. Under the traditional Brown Act, it's not entirely clear whether remote participation is allowed as a matter of right. I would argue that under the Brown Act, the intent is public participation. And so if we wanted to continue doing the Zoom in for the public, I don't see that as being a downside. It would only be, the real issue would be on the council side, is when you remote in, you'd have to post the agenda and allow public comment from your location. So in my opinion, I think you could, even though it's not entirely black and white under the Brown Act.
Okay. Councilmember Allen?
So reauthorizing what we're doing now will not require us to post an agenda remote if we're remote, or it will?
If you invoke AB 361, that requirement that you have to post the agenda at your location is suspended. You do not have to do that.
Okay.
And that's really the advantage.
Yeah.
Because again, in the time of COVID, do you want members of the public coming to your home to speak from public? I mean, I think that was really the intent of the waiver of that provision.
Well, I was just going to add,
Councilmember Robles.
when I was serving on Omnitrans, I was at the League of Cities meetings, so in the morning, I had to open my private hotel room, and I'm a traveling alone woman, and post the agenda. So, I mean, there's safety issues too. But I like if we could do it, I would like to be able to have the public be able to participate by Zoom.
All right, any further questions at this time? All right, are there any requests to speak from the public on this item?
No, Madam Mayor.
All right, so we'll bring it back to council for some direction to staff and a motion.
Mayor, if I'd like for it to stay the way it is, so by reauthorizing, or is it AB?
Invoking AB 360.
Invoking it, yeah, and then we'll be maintaining, attendees will be able to attend via Zoom, virtually, or in person, and we'll be able to do the same, correct? Just like we've been doing.
Yes, my only recommendation would be to ensure that we're social distancing in the
Yeah.
chambers, to be consistent with the finding.
Second
And so I'll make that motion.
Second for discussion.
All right, so your motion for staff recommendation?
Yes.
And second. So motion by Councilmember Allen, second by Councilmember Wilson. Any further discussion on this item?
Yes, to me, this looks just like another useless piece of legislation from the state. And let me just say, what they're doing is they're legalizing what they jumped into an emergency situation. So now they're putting, all the decorations and stuff on it to make sure that, the attorneys are happy with what's going to go on and they can defend it. So I just as soon support what we've got right now.
I think that the way that we've been conducting meetings has been very easy to request, to, how do I want to say it? I think we made it easier for residents and others to participate. I really like it when the council's all here because we have better discussions, but I also believe that if somebody's out of town and that's the one way that they can participate is through Zoom, I think that that's a better idea as well. So I like the way that we are operating at this time, and I would like to see us consider that. I'd like us, though, to set up the temperature gauge again. I think that's a nice thing to have people come in and make sure that they don't have a fever. And, we had the one you stand in front of. And then, and then maybe some way to request that members of different families or, have some sort of social distancing in the chairs. Further discussion? Well, I'd call for the vote, but I've lost a council member. And I know I have a quorum. However,
Madam Mayor, one of the points I'd like to make out about that social distancing thing is I think that it'd be important that we set a good example by continuing to social distance behind the dais the way you have been.
all right. Do you have any further comments at this time? If not, we'll go for a vote. You ready for voting? All right, so we have a motion for staff recommendation by Councilmember Allen and a second by Councilmember Wilson. Will you please call the roll call vote?
Council and Agency Member Allen.
Yes.
Council and Agency Member Wilson.
Yes.
Council and Agency Member Robles. Mayor Pro Tem, Vice Chair Hussey.
Yes.
Mayor and Chair McNabo.
Yes,
Motion passes unanimously.
thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to item 7 on our agenda, adoption of resolution declaring the city council's intention to conduct a public hearing and setting a public hearing relating to solid waste collection services. This includes solid waste recycling, disposal service, and green and food waste collection, and this would include rate increases for all of them. Mr. Eric Weck, Public Works Director and City Engineer.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and City Council. Eric Weck, Public Works Director for the record. So tonight, all we're here to do is to set a public hearing date. And I'd like to provide a little quick background before we conclude. So the City of Grand Terrace contracts with the Burtec to provide refuse hauling services. And Burtec has requested some rate increases on the basis that it's absorbing costs. And some of these costs that they're absorbing are increased fuel costs that we've all come to enjoy, as well as increased landfill fees. So these rate increases are proposed for both residential, multifamily, and commercial customers. And the last rate adjustment was approved back in August of 2019 and went into effect September 1st, 2019. So this proposed rate increase is a standard increase, and it does not include legislation for SB 1383, which is the organic waste reduction, which will be soon implemented by the city, and you'll be seeing another council report for that item. So staff recommends adopting the resolution to set a public hearing date for the proposed refuse rate adjustments for December 14th, 2021 at 6 p.m. to hear matters pertaining to the proposed refuse recycle disposal service and green and food waste collection rate increases. And staff is continuing to work with the hauler, Burtec, who, by the way, I'm joined by Mr. Mike Aragon, the Vice President for Burtec. And we're going to undertake the appropriate public notification measures for the public hearing. And finally, providing that there's less than a majority opposition to the rate increase for residential and commercial accounts, those new rates will take effect January 1st, 2022. Both myself and Mr. Aragon are available for any questions.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Weck. Are there questions of staff at this time? Councilmember Allen.
Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Weck, for your report. SB 13 was postponed, I think, for a year. Is that correct? The implementation of it, I think the governor or somebody postponed it for, was that?
13 or 1383?
The one for the organic waste collection.
I believe the city needs to take effect on that in January 1st, but more smarter people than
I mean,
myself.
it was supposed to take effect in January.
Mr. Aragon looks like he has a response
But
to this question.
I have a question about that anyway, so I'll voice my question and then you can respond. So my question is that, are you going to come back and want to increase the rates again when you implement that in the next few weeks or months?
I'll let Mr. Aragon answer that question.
Thank you. Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council, Mike Aragon, Burtec Waste Industries. With regard to SB 1383, legislation, I believe, has postponed the penalty phase of addressing 1383, which would take it from 2024 to 2025. However, the implementation date of 1383 still remains on January 1st of 2022. The rate increase that we are talking about is our annual rate increase that technically should have gone into play on July 1 of this year. It's been delayed and will go into effect pending council's approval on January 1st. The residential and commercial rates that are being, that the proposed increase is being asked for is, as Mr. Weck had mentioned, primarily for disposal costs. We elected this year not to pass through a CPI increase, which that would be part of the entitlement, so to speak. For residential, we did pass it through on commercial. Excuse me. And come December, we'll have a full presentation on those rates and all that it involves, all the adjustments that are included. As to 1383, that's a whole different ballgame that all of our cities and counties throughout the state are dealing with. We do have a rate schedule that will more than likely go into effect next year. It would be dependent on when the city chooses to implement that program. Cal Recycle wants you to implement the program January 1 of 2022. We have suggested to many of our communities, as will be with Grand Terrace, is to start with our public education and outreach. There are a number of activities that the city is responsible for that we'll be assisting the city with. But one of the major components in 1383 includes a residential food waste program. And while Cal Recycle would like all cities to implement that program on January 1, majority of our cities are implementing that. And I have had conversation with Cal Recycle regarding this, looking to implement the residential food waste program of the bill beginning in July of 22. With that will come an adjustment in the residential rate that would cover the processing of the food waste, as well as all of the administrative efforts taken to administer the 1383 program. That includes procurement issues, it includes edible food issues, it includes audits and reporting. Obviously a residential food waste collection program, and then the disposal and processing of food. So this is significant legislation that was passed. We tried from the League of Cities and ourselves as haulers and individual communities to work with the state in trying to offset some of the recommendations that are built into the bill. Unfortunately, the changes that were asked for didn't make it through, and we are now saddled with the fact that we need to do this. So it is quite substantial. We have already proposed a implementation plan that we have sent to staff. So it includes all of the various steps and choices that the city has, and also a checklist with regard to who needs to do what, whether it's a BURTEC responsibility or a city responsibility. So I think we have our arms around it. In fact, I'm fairly confident that we have our arms around this. We will be coming back to council with a full plan for your approval. And then prior to that, whether council in other communities that we serve, we've had workshops and meetings and so on and so forth to kind of go through that. If that happens to be a choice of this council, we'll be happy to put that on before those items come forward for final council approval with regard to the implementation of 1383. But that's just a kind of a brief overview.
Well, yeah, thank you very much for that. So I would like to ask you, you said that you're going to come back with something that designates what is BURTEC's responsibility and what the city's responsibility is. And you said that you feel like you sort of have your arms around this thing. So what is this thing that you have your arms around? Are you talking about this organic waste? And I mean, because just to let you know, there's not, I bet there's not 2% of the residents of this city that are aware of it. Right. And what I want to know from my fellow council members is, what responsibility do we have to implement this program, and who is supposed to be issuing out garbage or the buckets to put the food waste in? Who's,
Councilmember Allen.
And all that. And it's
Wait,
it's
Councilmember
like 65
Allen?
days from now.
What is in front of us tonight is whether we are going to declare that we are going to conduct a public hearing, and that public hearing is And the items that will come forward with that are pretty well involved in our staff report. The discussion that you're asking for is very important, but I don't believe that it is part of this agenda item.
Well, I
don't think-
agree, it's
I don't
not.
think this is the appropriate place for us to have that discussion, and it sounds to me like it's coming back to us for that discussion.
Well, I've asked for a SB 1383 to be an agendized item twice, and it hasn't been put on the agenda yet. And now we're coming down to the wire where the state's requiring it in 65 days or 70 days. So
Mr. City
anyway, but I
Attorney?
can wait, I can sit back like the rest of us.
Mr. City Attorney?
I agree that item is not appropriate to discuss tonight in detail. In answer to Mr. Allen's question, we are preparing an ordinance that would be coming to the council in the next month and possibly the next meeting for discussion with the
It
council.
just seems like we're a little behind the power curve on this, is what it seems like to me, but I can work with it.
Mr. Errigan says no, and he's
No.
part of this industry?
First of all, I apologize if I went a little overboard in my explanation. Please feel more than confident in your hauler. The elements within 1383 that are city's responsibilities have very little to do with the distribution of containers, collection, processing, reporting. All of that is our responsibility and what we will be doing. There are some minor things with regard to what the city purchases from a procurement standpoint. They did have a responsibility for edible food. We have a program now that will while we don't collect edible food because we collect garbage, but there is an edible food element so that that is not put into the trash. And we've developed a program with subcontractors to help the city with that. So we like to make all of our communities know the overall responsibilities, but probably 85–90% of what is needed we'll be providing and taking care of. So that shouldn't be a problem. We have your city attorney has done a very good job in putting together a new ordinance that covers these topics. I have gone through that, and I think it addresses all of the issues, as well as, I believe, did you have an amended, did you have a contract amendment as well?
Yes, but as I said, we'll probably get into that discussion.
Yeah,
further.
so those are parts of what all needs to happen, and that's all heading up into 2022. I've had these discussions with Cal Recycle. We have they have another list of priorities on existing legislation that we're checking the box on, and so I don't think the city needs to be in any concern over addressing the issues of 1383, and by mid-year or year's end, you'll be in full compliance. So I would feel very comfortable.
I move the recommendation.
Okay,
Seconded.
all right.
Is there
Thank you, Mr. Errigan.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate it.
that. Were there any other questions of staff before I go to public comment? Okay. Any requests to speak on this item, Madam City Clerk?
No, Madam Mayor.
All right, so we'll come back to the council, and we have a motion by Councilmember Robles for staff recommendation. We have a second by Councilmember Allen. And is there further deliberation on this item? All right, seeing none, will you please call the vote?
Councilmember Allen,
Yes.
Councilmember Wilson,
Yes.
Councilmember Robles.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Hussey.
Yes.
Mayor McNamara.
Yes,
Motion passes unanimously.
thank you. Next item is request for future agenda items by City Council, and we do not have any requests to entertain tonight, so we'll move on to our council communications, beginning with Councilmember Jeff Allen.
Thanks, Mayor. I went to the JPIA conference last week, and while I was there, some of the breakout sessions that I went to, the important stuff I brought back, I went to a session on cyber attacks, avoiding cyber attacks, cybersecurity. Some good points I took about, I bet all of you, just like me, certainly I can't be the only person who has a city email account that doesn't get phished. I get phished at least twice a week. And the city clerk, she gets I forward them all to her, and she sends them to IT, and because they're easy to find. But so we're getting cyber attacked on almost a daily basis here in our city. Sometimes it's really difficult to tell these. They're getting very well made, and many times these they were telling us that these hackers will cross-reference your professional name and find your personal account, and they'll determine that, oh, you're not, or like me, I'm too lazy to use multiple passwords. I use the same password for my city account, my home account, and everything else, so I can't remember them all. And they know that. And so they know, well, if I get one password, I can get in all those accounts. And that's one of the things they said, that and also to ensure that we check with our IT contractors and make sure that they have a high enough ransomware coverage, because ransomware attacks are getting very, very expensive. And whoever's responsible for paying them needs to have high enough coverage. Yeah, and then the other one was was about trail immunity, and I thought this was really interesting since we're trying to establish a park and trailhead here in our city. And I learned about the immunity that the city receives whenever they have these trails and parks. And so that was encouraging to know that those are in place, and about the trail and park immunity, and that you have those not only just through ownership, but also through easements of property. And we had a breakout session on social media. The bottom line about social media is it's very dangerous, but it's also a great means of one-way communications. In other words, the city putting information out to the public, but using social media, making posts. You know, you have to adhere to the First Amendment free speech rights. So if you open it up, your comments, you're posting for comments, you got to take all the comments, and not all the comments. You might not want to see some of them, because a lot of folks like to hate on City Hall sometimes. And yeah, we had our guest speaker was Captain Richard Phillips. You remember the Somali, who was kidnapped by the Somali pirates? They made a movie about him, Captain Phillips, and he was our guest speaker. Spoke about leading with courage and facing crises, and it was very encouraging and a really great talk. And they in the ethics breakout session, of course, that's always interesting, and it talks about how the bottom line is if you feel the need to have to ask someone else if what you want to do is ethically okay, then it probably isn't. A great example they gave was Vice President Pence asking Vice President Quayle if it was okay for him to overturn the election. And of course, Vice President Quayle said no. So anyway, and I'd like to let Councilmember Wilson know I thought about him this past week when I saw that the governor had signed the new laws, and one of the laws he signed was the one that gives local control to the cities and municipalities on setting speed limits in their own towns. And I thought, yes, all right, we are on cooking with oil now. And also banning gas-powered lawnmowers and leaf blowers, and I think that was a great effort there, because I know Councilmember Robles has been asking for an agenda item on that for a long time in our city, and I thought that was a really good thing. And he vetoed a bill, and I wanted to ask about this because I had asked our former city manager and didn't get a satisfactory answer. The governor vetoed a bill that would have allowed cannabis advertising on freeway signs in violation of Prop 64. So I know that we got a sign in our city limits, sits out on the freeway, and it's advertised as cannabis. So what's up with that? And that's all I've got. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Allen. Councilmember Doug Wilson.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, that's AB 43 in relation to trying to keep some of the city's rights and local jurisdictions. And I agree, very important. let's see how it gets beat up in court. Other than that, I don't have any other news for today.
Thank you,
Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Wilson. Councilmember Sylvia Robles.
Yes, Mayor, I want to use my time also to recognize the contributions that Lisa Boone made to the Women's Club. And Lisa would be called upon to provide a word of inspiration, and she would just read these beautiful excerpts to us. And I want to let the family know that all those women have talked, and we're going to miss her very much. And in the spirit of that, I looked for something to read that I thought would reflect who she was and her last possible words to us. And it starts, "Look not back on yesterday or what you left behind, for only today is yours to claim, and this moment only is your time. Fret not on what has been or on what has passed you by. Yesterday is far behind you. You can't change it if you try. New opportunities await you. They come with each new day. So look ahead with faith and hope, and blessings will come your way. Keep faith alive in your heart. Live full and live well each day. Do all the good for all you can to all those who pass your way. Yesterday is out of your reach, and tomorrow is not yours to claim. Only this moment belongs to you, so use it wisely in Jesus' name."
Thank you. That was very fitting. I can hear her reading that. Thank you very much. Mayor Pro Tem Bill Hussey.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a thing that was brought to my attention, I got emails and phone calls and concerns about the grant that was given to outlining cities for additional traffic control and stuff for the sheriffs. But talking to Lieutenant Lane, he's doing a follow-up, and he's got pretty much in detail report. So just hopefully we could bring Lieutenant Lane back with everything that he has on that, so the residents know what's going on with the sheriffs and a broader perspective, so we can have, if they need to have public comments. So I'd like to see that talked about, so and brought back later. But I just want to thank everybody for the staff for all their work they're doing and stuff, and really appreciate it, and hope everybody had a great holiday. So that's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I have a few things to report. It looks like I have way too much to report. I will start with this. There was a great honor that I was able to represent the council and the city to present Eagle Scout commendation for John Dirk from Troop 40. He had his Eagle Scout Court of Honor on Sunday, and he's a fine young man, and he's going to do a lot of wonderful things for his community and his country. So it's unfortunate that we weren't able to recognize him when we originally thought at a council meeting, but this was a nice way to do it as well. And he and his mother were very happy that the city recognized him in that way. I also attended the Joint Powers Insurance Authority Risk Management Conference and the annual board meeting, the 6th through the 8th. I did listen to the keynote speaker, Captain Phillips, and I was amazed by how even-toned this man was when he described what happened to him over a number of days with Somali pirates taking his ship and actually having him in a smaller craft for a number of days as well. He's quite an incredible individual, but he did have the message that he believed that every one of us would be able to find it within themselves to do what needed to be done under a trying circumstance. He also continued to say, expect the best, but you need to be prepared for the worst. And his crew on his ship were prepared for things to not go as they thought. And that's really what helped them to get through. And so that's a good message for cities, is you want to plan for the best, and you want to plan for things to go how you expect them to. But you need to imagine what might happen in an emergency situation and how you're going to handle that and how you're going to communicate with each other when something does eventually happen, so that you can get through it with minimal damage. I also attended the Avoiding Cyber Attacks breakout session. JPIA has a really, they've really devoted a lot of time to creating a process to help their member agencies when it comes to cyber attacks and ransomware. And so I'm hoping that staff will work with our IT department and get them connected with the risk manager, so that if something should happen with our network, that there's a good line of communication between both parties, and we as a city avail ourselves of all the expertise that our IT company has to offer, but also that JPIA has to offer. And then we also probably need to make sure that we know how much our coverage is for cyber attacks. I attended a breakout session called How Partisan Public Opinion and Large Verdicts Impact Law Enforcement, hoping to find out something about the current state of affairs with law enforcement and what might be coming out to alleviate some of the issues that have gone on with the public and law enforcement. But it ended up being more about choosing jurors for trials, so it really wasn't a good fit for our city at this point. And then I also attended a tree inspection and maintenance breakout session, which really has a lot to relate to our contract with West Coast Arborers. JPIA has some templates that they're coming up with. They also have some recommendations for insurance coverage and the way that insurance matches up with what the contract says, to make sure that the city is covered for eventualities that might come from that. So I'll make sure I share that with staff. Let's see, Omnitrans, October 6th board meeting. We looking at a third-party consultant to provide natural gas and management of low-carbon fuel. So a lot of the buses are now transitioning to from natural gas to low-carbon fuel. And so there's a lot of infrastructure that they're working on for that. They've also changed to PrimeGov for their agenda management system, and that is helping to create a system that is easier to access and for the public to follow. Of course, we had our financial reports because it is the fourth quarter. We called a public hearing for proposed Omni Ride, which is on-demand ridership. They say that they're not trying to compete with Uber or Lyft, but it's not like your regular bus that is on standard fixed routes, and it allows a little bit more flexibility for those who need it. So they're doing a trial in Bloomington, and from there that will have an opportunity maybe for Grand Terrace to look at having something here. I think they did a trial in Chino as well. So I'm looking forward to seeing if that's something that could apply to the rider choices in Grand Terrace in the future. We also voted to continue the free fares to school. So the free fares for school had preliminary numbers for September, and they indicate a continued modest growth. Average daily ridership is 16,615, which is approximately 30% from the same period last year, but still approximately 50% below pre-pandemic levels. So they have some room to grow there. The free fares for school program continues to grow with approximately 75,000 riders since the program inception in August. And so it's great that we're getting more ridership, but if we're not getting any revenue, that can't hold out forever. We also are back to hybrid meetings. We had the same discussion, or a similar discussion with the board that we had tonight with the council as far as coming back to meetings. San Bernardino County Transportation Authority on October 6th also. We have, again, had the similar discussion, and we are back to in-person meetings. We had really hoped that we could do a hybrid and allow people out in Needles and far out places like that to take advantage of that, but we've come back to in-person meetings. We felt that was the best way to go. We also approved modifications to procurement and special risk assessment policy, modifications to real property policy, which was formerly the rail property policy. And so this just applies to all property owned by the San Bernardino County Transportation Authority. We awarded a disclosure bond counsel and bond counsel services. We will be selling bonds to fund a couple of our major projects. The 2021 interim update of the countywide transportation plan was presented to us. We put out a request for proposal for aero maintenance facility. That's the Redlands passenger rail that also hooks up with the Metro Link. So it goes out to Redlands, it comes through San Bernardino at their facility there, and there will be a number of trains, Metrolink trains that will make that full route and continue on and departs into LA, and then if it's the Aero trains, there's an opportunity to transfer in San Bernardino to Metrolink to take it points west. The maintenance facility will be a hydrogen fuel upgrade project and construction management consultant services. So those are the skills that we need. The Aero passenger rail service fare policy alternatives was presented, and that will come back to us. Redlands passenger rail project update on diesel multiple unit testing location. They were going to be testing those on the Paris Valley line of Metrolink, but they've decided to test in another location closer to Redlands. We had updates on project delivery and funding sources, and funding sources are a little hard to come by, especially if we're looking at wanting to widen the freeway, because the state says, yeah, we're not really wanting you to encourage more automobile traffic. We like these rail projects. And updates on project delivery. Okay, so we also had hearings to consider resolutions of necessity for property interest for the Mount Vernon Viaduct project in the city of San Bernardino, and that will be wonderful when it's done. That is the last thing that I have to report. So back to my agenda. And Mr. City Manager, do you have communications for us?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I do. The subcommittee for the National Orange Show, we're going to have a meeting. That's council members Wilson and Robles and Steve Weiss and myself, probably next week. Mr. Weiss and I have, in fact, had a meeting today with the city of Loma Linda and the promoters to try and work together on solving the noise issue and the bass problem that this community has long suffered. They have agreed to actually put some type of sound mechanism reading at Councilmember Robles' house. The next concerts, if that's what, I guess that's what you call them, is just the weekend of Halloween, which Halloween's on Sunday, so it'll be that Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. That Wednesday before Halloween, they've invited us and the members of the city of Loma Linda staff to attend an on-site presentation as they get ready for the next concert, so we can see hopefully what they're doing. I know Councilman Wilson has a lot of history with sound, and as he's mentioned to us before, so that'll be very helpful to us. Then just to let you know, the lift for our senior bus is for the disabilities not working in fact, it's not working. So we're unable to transport those who need that lift to work. But we had a meeting today with the CAO, is that her title, Mayor? Erin Rogers at Omnitrans, the general manager?
Executive director.
Executive director. And we had a good conversation with her. She's going to try and assist us in maybe securing a newer van than we have, but an older van than Omnitrans could use. So we will pursue that and we'll report back, because I know Councilman Allen has helped with some ideas on fixing the existing bus, but unfortunately they were good ideas. They just weren't we weren't able to implement them. And since you mentioned one thing, I like to mention some of the folks I used to work for. My first mayor was Harold Hayes, and he made the vote for the acquisition of the S&P tracks back in 1978 or 9, which is what secured the railway for Metrolink. And he was quite a leader in transportation, and I know that once in a while someone talks about him still. He was well known for, when he was president of the League of California Cities in 1973, he introduced the speaker, the General Assembly speaker at the conference that year. It was Governor Reagan, and he introduced him as President Reagan. So he was the first person to do that. So I've always remembered that story. So enough story from me tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Millhiser. At this time, we will recess to closed session. 2 items. First one is a conference with real property negotiators pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.8. Property is 22125 Barton Road, APN 1167-231-11-0000. City negotiator Michael Millhiser, interim city manager. Adrian Guerra, city attorney. Negotiating parties, San Bernardino County Transportation Authority. Under negotiation, price and terms of payment. The second item is a combined item of the City Council, and the City Council is the successor agency to the Community Redevelopment Agency, in its conference with legal counsel, initiation of litigation pursuant to Section 54956.9C, number of cases, 1. And so for those of you that will not be here when we come back, we will be closing in memory of Lisa Boone, who is a wonderful civic participant in our city and in the Women's Club, very gentle soul, and please keep her and her family in your thoughts and prayers. And so at this time, we are in recess to close session. All right, we'll reconvene to open session. Council met in closed session to address 2 issues. The first was a conference with real property negotiators pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.8. There are no reportable actions on this item, but we did give direction to staff. Item number 2, conference with legal counsel, initiation of litigation pursuant to Section 54956.9C. This was a joint item between the City Council, and the City Council is a successor agency to the Community Redevelopment Agency, and there are no reportable actions on this item. At this time, we will be closing in memory of Lisa Boone. Please hold her and and Lisa's family in your hearts, thoughts, and prayers. And we will adjourn to the next regular City Council meeting, which will be held on Tuesday, October 26, 2021, at 6 p.m. Any request to have an item placed on future agenda must be made in writing and submitted to the City Clerk's office. The request will be processed in accordance with council procedures. We are adjourned. They're available at the front entrance.